Last night was a very heavy full moon here in Dublin, and it was very visible over the city, and particularly where we live, where there's very little light pollution. One of the things that my parents and I hardly slept last night, actually, it was awful because it was so magnetic and so heavy that it really had a strong effect on us. One of the things that dawned on me last night was that, as much as people like myself are going on about a cult and how there's this cult happening, that in fact we are in a state of recovery as much as anybody else might be. The only exception possibly being that we're somewhat further down the road than the vast majority seem to be at present. I'm making the point that we are victims of this as well as anyone else. Okay, we're making our videos out here, we're talking about a cult, we're refusing to wear masks. That's valid, and what we're doing is the right thing. But it does not mean that we haven't been victimized by the same monsters that have unleashed perdition on Western society since April or March or April of 2020, and particularly intensified since Biden took over the US presidency. We're all victims of this. We're all traumatized by this. People have lost their jobs. People have lost their incomes from this. We're not immune from that. The only difference, as I said, is that somewhat similar to the film They Live, which talks about people who are identified as a seer, we might be closer to that particular position at this stage. In 2020, when the Irish people allowed Fine Gael to get 35 seats back in the Dáil again, that was the point at which, initially I was shocked and depressed, but that was the point at which I said, I don't need to worry about politics, I need to worry about the mainstream media. Because you need to stay focused. Whoever you are, whatever you're doing, it is better to focus well on one thing than to be going scattergun at a load of different things. So I decided that I would focus on the mainstream media. That arose because I saw in 2019 how the mainstream media were lying on behalf of Varadkar when he was then Taoiseach. RTE were lying to cover up Varadkar's attempts to smear whistleblowers in Waterford Hospital. Now, Varadkar did that, but then RTE became his accomplice by claiming that he'd apologised, or in fact he hadn't. A good journalist would have been going after Varadkar and saying, hang on, that's not an apology. Why have you not apologised? Whereas RTE conspired with Varadkar to bury the matter. That was the point then at which that was unforgivable for me, because there were 4 doctors who were doing their best and had spotted malpractice in their hospital. They'd been attacked by senior management, they were attacked by the Taoiseach, and then when they raised the matter and the matter was actually running and had gained some traction, RTE conspired with Varadkar to bury the matter and to take it out of the public consciousness. So I cannot forgive them for that. I cannot forgive RTE for that. What we've seen then this year is that RTE had a party for some old slapper who was retiring, some charge hand, reception manager. There's a photograph of her standing beside a transsexual. And this was a mockery of all of those people who had been led by RTE primarily, and the Irish Times as their accomplice. Everybody in the Irish Times wants to work in RTE, you see. So this is why they're all so lickspittle. The mainstream media in this country, they all, the golden ticket for them, the holy grail for them, is to get the permanent job in RTE. If you look at RTE and the people who get permanent jobs, Keelan Shandley is one example. Keelan Shandley got a permanent job in RTE in her 20s. That means she was in the circle. You don't get a permanent job in RTE in your 20s if you're not in the circle. It is as simple as that. RTE is one big insider clique circle, mainly from inbred family members. I've digressed slightly. But lately now we're seeing Varadkar in his capacity as pretend Taoiseach, but where all of his lickspittle brus in the mainstream media, Montrose, like the Irish Times, treat him as the real Taoiseach. He does that because Micheál Martin tolerates it. But that's Micheál Martin's lookout. Anyway, Varadkar was talking about extending the lockdowns for a year. And what was quite apparent from this latest video was that Varadkar was getting high on this. This is not said facetiously. I believe he possibly was getting sexual excitement from it. There's something really, really depraved about Varadkar? Well, it's a psychopath. You know, once you accept that it's a psychopath, then all the rest follows. I accepted that long ago. I accepted that. Varadkar came onto my personal radar in 2017 when he became Taoiseach without a general election. And his immediate behaviour said to me immediately, psychopath. We don't need to go into details. But there is this latest video of Varadkar. You'll see it on Twitter or thereabouts, absolutely salivating at the prospect of more lockdowns. I'd spotted this last year when Varadkar put up a tweet saying, so sorry for all the private businesses, just when they were ready to go again. He was gloating at that. I saw the beast. I saw that thing. It was gloating. I shouldn't use he. It's not human. It was gloating at the notion of small to medium-sized enterprises almost ready to restart, and then the lockdown came in again. Now, of course, the RTE staff got away with it. They got away with it. Apparently a file has been sent to the DPP. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Because what they did in RTE was they brought that organisation formally, in a formal sense, they brought that organisation into disrepute. John Williams, the head of News and Current Affairs, was at that party as well and is photographed doing that. They brought RTE officially into disrepute through their conduct. They should all have been suspended without pay, pending the file being sent to the DPP. If they're then prosecuted, that's not going to happen. They'll be given carte blanche. But if they're prosecuted, then they're still suspended on no pay until the prosecution ends one way or another. If they're convicted, they're sacked immediately. That's how it should work. That's how it would work to anybody who is not in that golden circle of RTE. Instead, they were made to watch a 10-minute video and do a half-hearted and insincere apology on the news. Yeah, that's great, isn't it? Doesn't bother me. I'm not a sucker. I'm not a sucker. I didn't buy into any of this from the start, but the people who did buy into it should now begin to realise that they are being openly abused by Varadkar and by RTE. And Tony Holohan, that article, Tony Holohan. So we are all coming out of this. We are all recovering from a cult here. But there are those of us, as I said, who know what's happening, like myself, like Thomas, like many of the others. And then there are those who are still baffled about what's going on. We are doing our best out here. When John Williams came out with that ridiculous video last year, The Truth Matters. That's a real psychopathic inversion. The biggest liar going in Irish media is John Williams. The biggest crook in Irish media is John Williams. The Truth Matters. But that's typical psychopathic inversion. When he came out with that thing last year, what that showed us was that we were succeeding. Me sitting here talking into a microphone. At least you get to see Sticks, Hexenhammer. You don't even get to see me. Probably just as well. I'm going to do a series of videos eventually. And I did an interview last week with Greg Moffat on Legalise Freedom. Greg's a great interviewer. I did one with him before. I was very happy with it. I did another one. I'm looking forward to when he publishes it. One of the things I said to Greg is that I'm going to do a series of interviews with other gay men. And I'm still not fully worked out why I'm putting in this next criterion. There'll be video interviews. They won't be live streamed. In other words, they'll be recorded in advance. And what I explain next will make it clear why I'm doing that. Both myself and the people, the men who I'll be interviewing, will be sitting cam to cam completely naked. Now, I'm going to make sure we're sitting behind our desks so no incriminating material will be visible. But when you think about it, if you sit with other men in a sauna or on a beach or that kind of thing and nobody has any clothes on, it's terribly disarming. You cannot hide things, literally. It's interesting to see how it breaks down boundaries. So this is what I'm going to do. We're going to do video interviews. I'm going to be naked. They're going to be completely naked. I'll be interested to see if anyone takes me up on that. And all we'll be doing is just chatting. So in other words, it'll be not unlike Legalise Freedom, except there's no visuals. There will be visuals in this. But as I said, we'll all be sitting behind our desks, that kind of thing. We'll be chatting about whatever they want to chat about. Greg is like that with Legalise Freedom. You know, he said to me, well, what do you want to make as the agenda? I don't know. I said, we'll just chat. So that's sometimes the best thing. But it'll be men, it'll be gay men, and we'll be talking about what we want to talk about. So I'll be interested to see how many others will take me up on that, but I'm game for that one, and certainly it should be just a bit of laugh as well. Getting back to what I was talking about, I also noticed something online. I noticed a demonstration somewhere in Argentina in favour of abortion rights. And part of this demonstration involved some of the demonstrators getting a baby doll, stamping on it, crushing it, and decapitating it. That is very offensive and provocative behaviour in public. Should it be outlawed? No. It is actually legitimate protest and legitimate expression coming from adults. I noticed that there were children taking part in that particular ritual as well. That's perfectly legitimate for a knock on the door from social services, and I hope that happens. To indoctrinate children in a grotesque ritual like that, which I find personally offensive, that doesn't mean I'd outlaw it, but I find it personally shocking and offensive. To enlist your children into that, no, that's an abuse. For adults to do that is legitimate expression. We're dealing here with the issue now of legitimate but offensive expression being closed down. So more than ever, we have to be vigilant about saying, although somebody offends and upsets us with their demonstration, we need to allow them to do it. I'm pro-choice. I've always been pro-choice my entire life. My position has been a simple one. A woman has a private relationship primarily with herself and her own body, and then possibly her GP. If she doesn't want to go ahead with the pregnancy, it's her body, her choice. That has always been my position consistently. Anybody who knows me will know that. This is why I applied that criterion, exactly that criterion, in all earnestness and in full transfer to my right not to wear a mask. My body, my choice. Some of the people online have said, isn't it interesting how hypocritical how hypocritical all the anti-masker Lula Egypts, all those bloody Egypts who are anti-masker. This is the gaslight that's going on. All those bloody Egypts who are anti-masker. None of them is in favour of a woman's right to choose. This is the gaslight going on out there with all of those wokies. This is their generalisation, their targeting and smearing of us. I've always been in favour of a woman's right to choose, and by that very same criterion, it's my right to choose not to wear a mask. It is actually the same thing. The notion of a woman who's pregnant, who doesn't want to be pregnant, for whatever reason best known to herself, the notion of that woman being put through the huge psychological distress of being made go through a pregnancy that she doesn't fully want, to my mind is so abhorrent. It's exactly the same criterion I'm applying to my not wanting to wear a mask. Extreme distress. Absolutely it is. The mask thing, I've said before, is a trick. It's a scam. I'm only talking now from the Republic of Ireland point of view. I assume that it's structured somewhat similar in other ostensibly or nominally free societies. I believe that the whole thing with the mask scam has been deliberate. One of the things that it has done is pit ordinary civilians against other ordinary civilians. I believe that was intentional. I had meant to say that more cogently in other videos of mine. But from the outset, what I noticed was, first of all, when I read the statutory instrument, it said, there are exemptions for extreme distress and difficulty breathing, and there's no burden of proof on anybody to show it. I spoke to a lawyer yesterday, and she said I was right. I was right all along about that. When you're looking at statute or rules and regulations, any experienced lawyer will tell you, don't just look for what it includes, look for what it excludes. The statutory instrument pertaining to masks here in Ireland excludes a burden of proof upon a person who's claiming an exemption. That's the end of it. That's it. Then, when they brought out the statutory instrument in August, all of Ranelagh erupted in one brow of jazz hands, in which, Ranelagh is where you will see, if you want to dip in like a dipstick into normie, middle-class, smug, over-indebted, mortgage property ladder class Ireland, all the Fine Gael people. Well, I like a bit of politics and I like a bit of rugby. Yeah, you're Fine Gael. You want to see that, dip a dipstick into Ranelagh. Ranelagh's where it's at in that regard. If you want to open up the horror book of that. I mean, where I live in Howth, Dalkey, those kind of places, they're not nearly as Ranelagh-esque as Ranelagh. Hope's a very rebellious place. I don't know about Dalkey. Dalkey's very pleasant, but Pat Kenny lives there. Anyway, if you back in August, there were letters to the Irish Times. The Irish Times letters page is read by the government. You may take that one to the bank from me. The Irish Times letters page is read by the government. Anyway, there were all these, after the statutory instrument came in August, there were all these letters to the Irish Times letters page from all the ones in Ranelagh. Some honorary mentions from Montanut and Cork, Clontarf and I think Drumcondra, where have you, Malahide, of course. Absolutely having a NPC software breakdown fit over the fact that, you know, there was extreme distress and difficulty breathing were the exemptions, and they noticed that there was no burden of proof. So of course they were calling upon the government to, you know, deal with this omission, and all of our friends in Ranelagh on the Irish Times letters page, which is read by the government, were insisting that the government address these loopholes and these omissions and these silences in the law. And nothing happened. And when I read that in the Irish Times letters page, sometimes I do dip into the Irish Times letters page. It's what Thomas Sheridan says. You have to let us experienced seers dip into this because, you know, we're so red-pilled at this stage. We can read all this rubbish. Nothing happened. That means it's deliberate. All right? That means it's deliberate. So anyway, let's fast forward to the 13th of December, and a busybody called the Gardaí on me in the supermarket, despite being told by the branch manager, one shop worker and the security guard that I had permission not to wear a mask. He calls the guards anyway. The guards come down. They talk. First of all, they're greeted by the security guard who said this is a waste of time and that particular shopper has been given permission not to wear a mask. Okay, they went to your man who had made the complaint and they said, now you need to leave immediately. Blah, blah, blah. You need to leave immediately and we'll walk you out. So they did, and they came over to me and they said, well, we're sorry to have wasted your time. I said, no, you didn't do it. I said, it's the person who's to blame is that man. I said, the shop didn't do it. They made it clear to him. They made it very clear to him. I can testify to that. I said 3 members of this shop staff, a security guard, the manager, and one of the ordinary workers made it very clear to that man that I had permission not to wear a mask. I said when he made his initial complaint to the floor worker in the shop, the floor worker comes up to me and says very politely, excuse me, sir, may I ask why you're not wearing a mask? Certainly, I said, I've been given permission by the branch manager. Oh, that's fine, he says. So it's not as if the shop worker even behaved in any kind of objectionable or wrong way. He asked me a question, I gave him an answer, he was fine. And then the geezer who was going on about this wouldn't hear of it. This is deliberate. This was staged to happen. And as Thomas says, and as other people say, this is a gift because we're seeing these monsters in their real light now. The veneer of respectability has gone. It's like when the tide goes out and you see all the, you know, the seaweed and the crabs and barnacles below. This is what we're seeing. The tide has gone out and we're seeing this now. Take note of those snitches. Take note of them for the rest of your life and have nothing to do with them. And make sure you tell other people who they are and name them. You have to do that. Because the Holocaust and the Second World War was groomed incrementally. When you look at it, really, Hitler was grooming that for 10 years before 1940. Mein Kampf, all of these various different things. Everything was put in place incrementally. So the masks is part of that. When my parents were 10, my parents were both still alive, when they were 10, cattle trucks were rounding up Jewish people across Europe to be brought to abattoirs like Auschwitz to be killed. So are you suggesting that that didn't happen? Are you a Holocaust denier? That did happen. And that can happen again. And it happens again, first of all, by psychic attack, which the Nazis did by grooming a large quorum of normies and cheesebrains to believe that the Jews were the font of all evil. Secondly, then, they put in place bureaucratizing rules that Jews had to wear a yellow star. That Jews had to register, that they had to live in ghettos. At the end of the war, when the Warsaw Ghetto, and particularly when the Warsaw Ghetto broke out, the collaborators, these Jewish committees who worked with the Nazis, they were the first to get the bullet. Absolutely. You don't work with these people. They're not people. You don't work with these monsters. You fight them from the start. So we're not bloody idiots to say we're not wearing a mask. We're not bloody idiots to do that. Then there's the question of attending public protests, all that Dee Wall kind of carry on. Dee Wall is a Garda plant, by the way. Please let her hear that I said this. Lots of people. Therese Cahill, I don't agree with Therese Cahill and everything. Therese Cahill is very pro-mask, but at the same time she has some hysterically funny videos of Dee Wall. Particularly a song about being a Garda plant. I mean, Therese Cahill is a talented comedian, you know, but she's pro-mask, and she, you know, is calling people who... She's quite abusive and insulting to those of us who have chosen that my body, my choice, and I'm choosing not to wear a mask. She's a bit inconsiderate at that, but she is a talented comedian, and her satire of Dee Wall is just absolutely on the mark. Absolutely on the mark. And it actually gives me... Her particular videos of Dee Wall coughing, this one she did, you know, last year, just, it gave me a pain in my guts laughing. Because, you know, it just does capture the Dee Wall thing. Dee Wall is a Garda plant. If you look at the history of Dee Wall, anybody who's got in with her ends up in trouble with the law, yet Dee doesn't. Why not? Dee insults the Gardaí. She incites illegal gatherings because of the COVID-19 restrictions. That was an illegal gathering in RTE. Let's see what happens there. Ha ha ha. But Dee Wall, if you associate with Dee Wall, you're in trouble immediately. You know, Andy Heisman, Gemma O'Doherty, another woman. They've all ended up either being dragged before the courts or getting convictions. Now, I sought medical exemption. I sought actually a doctor's cert in relation to my gingivitis for wearing a mask. I was told I didn't need medical certification. If anybody has been convicted of a mask-related offence, and it can be shown that prior to that a demand was made at them either by the Gardaí or those in charge, such as bus drivers or shop workers or managers of shops, that a demand was made that they show medical certification, that could be reopened. It should have been put in their defence, but the problem for everybody, including district court judges, is that they don't know what's going on here. It's not as if our government is communicating properly. They're psychopaths. Psychopaths don't communicate properly. Part of dealing with psychopaths, including things like Varadkar, Micheál Martin, who I'm satisfied is a psychopath as well, you know, Tony Holohan, they don't communicate in clear and consistent terms. If they did, they wouldn't be psychopaths. So I'm reluctant to condemn a district court judge for convicting these people. But I do believe that if in their defence, when cross-examining the Garda or cross-examining anybody authorised who might have come in to give evidence against them, if they had established that a demand was made for medical certification, that's a mistrial. There you go. Sooner or later, they're going to be coming after me. And I'm not complacent about that. As I've said before, I haven't got into trouble once since the whole COVID-19 thing started. That individual called the guards on me. I didn't get into trouble. I've gone to every shop I've gone to occasionally. They have politely asked me, why you're not wearing a mask, or you need to wear a mask. No, I have an exemption. That's fine. That's what they've always said. I've said this on my videos before. I will say it again. You know, it's not as if I've got into trouble. I've not got into trouble. But I'm watching carefully to see if they're going to change those boundaries in relation to burdens of proof of an exemption. If they do that, we might have a problem. We might have a problem then. Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters, I have been very critical of their approach. I'm not critical in attacking them as people. I never would do that. They haven't criticised or attacked me, far from it. I don't think they've said anything about me. I don't think I'm that prominent on their radar at this moment in time. John Waters has always spoken out very eloquently about the mask thing. You know, he's an eloquent speaker. He's an inspiring speaker. This is why, of course, the likes of Waterwood Whispers insult and jeer him, because they know not that he's wrong, but that he's right. Gemma O'Doherty's a different quantity. She's a race baiter. She's done that. Much of her behaviour has been objectionable, objectively. None of John's has. John is a brave individual. He's been taking on the system for many, many, many years. This is no new thing for John Waters, more than it's a new thing for me, really, because if you look at my litigious history, I've been taking on the system for a while as well, to very mixed success. But the problem for John and Gemma is that they're going about their latest litigious venture wrongly. Procedurally, it's wrong. I'll say that again. I predict that they will lose their appeal. I wish them the best luck in the world. Anyway, they're doing a good thing overall by getting people to focus on this, but they could have done it a lot better, and that's the shame. That's the pity of it. But we're looking back now at Varadkar, and the beast is emerging. The reptile is emerging out of that thing. Not joking. Not exaggerating. The reptile is emerging, salivating at the notion of the people being kept on lockdown for another year. RTE being RTE, had their cameras in Dublin Airport, videoing people coming through the airport in a flight. If I had been on that flight and I had ended up on the RTE news, the writ would be with them today. Because those people have a right to an assumption of innocence, or a presumption of innocence. We assume that those people were not breaking the law and getting that flight, coming through Dublin Airport, doing whatever. That's RTE trying to deflect away from what happened with the slapper charge hands do back in November. That is a psychopathic thing that RTE is doing. That's Williams. Williams is behind that. You can bet your bloody life Williams is behind that. Sending the camera crews to the airport to pick on ordinary law-abiding civilians who, for some reason, were allowed to board a flight. It was a scheduled flight. They came through the airport. I don't see anything untoward here. Do you? I don't. Yet RTE were there, without warning, video recording those people. Here's the thing. Who let RTE into the airport? Because I don't think they like live video recording in the airport that much. Who let RTE in? Because RTE weren't just doing it on a phone. Because that's not how RTE work. RTE have 5 people to do one person's job. Because they're so bloody unionised. So there was a crew from RTE openly in Dublin Airport, invading the privacy of people who had arrived in on a flight. You know, the hypocrisy of these monsters is rank. It's like a sewer. You can smell it now. And at the same time we have Varadkar, you know, twitching and gloating. I suspect he was coked up as well, about how this is going to, there's no end in sight to this. I had a conversation with people last week. I've explained it in a previous video. What I said to them was, this will end tomorrow when enough Irish people decide it will. And that's the way it still is.